Thank you for finding the NSE podcast on YouTube. To find links for our online hospitality security training, check out the video description below. Enjoy the Nightlife Security Podcast.
Welcome to the Nightclub Security Podcast, a professional resource for the nightclub security industry. Whether you're a nightclub bouncer, guard, owner, or operator, this is the podcast for you. We're here to inform, educate, and entertain. Let's get started.
Welcome to Nightlife Security Podcast. This is your host, Manny Marquez. We're coming to you from our studio here in San Diego, California. And I know it's been a little bit of a time since we've last joined you via our podcast, but today, actually, I have an interview that I did with Robert Pomplun. Robert Pomplun is the Chief Learning Officer and founder of Serving Alcohol Incorporated. They are an online training provider for responsible beverage service. And we've been in contact for a long time now. And actually, I've had a chance to review their training program, which is fantastic. And I wanted to get together with Robert and talk to him a little bit about, or dive into a conversation and just how important responsible beverage service is to an overall security program within a hospitality venue. And, you know, it's been one of the things that has been a bit of a cornerstone in our training, that if you have a lot of issues as an operator or within a venue when it comes to security issues, if you have a lot of problems, I can almost bet and guarantee that there is a issue with over service and when it comes to responsible beverage service. So we dive into a conversation today talking about the two sides of the business, responsible beverage service and what that means for the overall success of your hospitality security program. And so I'd like to invite you to sit down and join us today and listen to this conversation. A lot of good insight, a lot of good points made. So go ahead and join us and enjoy the following interview. And thank you for joining us today. I'd like to welcome Robert Pomplun to the podcast. Robert, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing well today, Manny. And you?
We're doing well. It feels like summer here in San Diego. And you're in Wisconsin. How are you guys doing over there?
It's it's not bad today. It's about 40. But it was last week a lot more of an issue. It was like 40 below.
Well, you're welcome to come to San Diego anytime to enjoy the good weather over here. So, Robert, the reason why we decided to have today's discussion is we wanted to talk about your side of the business, which let's talk a little bit about your company, Serving Alcohol Incorporated. You've been training responsible beverage service since I believe it was 1982?
Yeah, 1982 is when I really started, and then 85 is when I formulated the business to go full-time, more or less.
And how did you get started in that side of hospitality on the training side?
Well, I always wondered what was the best way to handle things sometimes, and sometimes I didn't agree with the way things were handled, so I wanted to learn a little bit more about the business, and it transcended over this. I have a teaching degree for teaching in high school and junior high and from college, and it just transcended over into serving alcohol and hopefully the right way to do things.
And what did you think, or what did you believe at the time that you could bring different to the table than what was being delivered at the time?
Well, I grew up in Wisconsin, where bars were a place where you went to play cards and to be socializing with people that you liked. And it's pretty active drinking area there too. The future, I just thought that the general care of people is to bring them back so that they can come in and enjoy the friendliness and compassion and awareness of other people at the same time. So basically, everything like dealing with the interactions of people, I wanted to make sure that they had fun, they were safe, and they came back.
So your primary concern at the time was just the safety of your patrons and making sure you were doing right by them.
Well, alcohol is a drug, and people can misuse it and abuse it. There are a certain percentage of people that drink more than others, and those are probably people you'll see more frequently at times. I just think that we have to take care of people to make sure that they can have fun and come back and have more fun.
And your exposure to the alcohol service or the beverage service side is, you were in hospitality for quite a while, right?
Yeah, I had 18 years that I managed and bartended before I got into server training.
Did you, once you transitioned into serving alcohol, the training site, were you still working in hospitality at the time?
Yeah, it was a progression of 3 years.
Gotcha. Tell us a little bit about how you deliver the training. I know some of it's in person, but you also have a website and an online platform. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I've been doing seminars. Sometimes I did huge amounts of seminars on a yearly basis. I mean, just tons and tons. And basically interacting with people and giving them information that helps them to better able their ability to sell alcohol safely. And a lot of people aren't aware of some of the responsibilities that they have in their duty of care, especially if they're younger. And that creates an opportunity for risk. So the way that I teach is to eliminate opportunities of risk to try and prevent a tragedy from occurring. I'll give you an example. I worked with a judge named Judge Dean. We developed a program called Safe Cabs 10 years ago. We reduced DWIs by just getting people home in small towns by 72% in 8 counties. So we saved a lot of people's lives. I've been a member with RHI since 1985 with Jim Peters. I've taken, just recently, I've taken 3 nighttime manager courses for large cities on how to manage alcohol risks within those cities. I think learning and teaching is an ongoing and continual thing, in that if we open our minds, we can make our environment safer and get people to bond and blend to enjoy their activities when they're drinking, and not to create risks for themselves or other people if we can avoid doing that.
When did you transition from the in-person training activities to an online platform?
I think we did that 14 years ago, I think. Is that right? I think it's 14 years.
14 years?
Yeah.
And you know, I've had a chance to evaluate multiple responsible beverage service training curriculums over the years. And what I've noticed is your program, the content is so much better. The focus on the content and usable information. Was that a conscious choice as you guys developed the online program?
Well, I don't think regular staff members are aware of the power of the words, and everything that they say is an act of the owner. The owner is responsible for everything that they did or didn't do. So I think they have a right to understand how words play a role in the degree of exposure that they have, and they should understand that. They should understand that they have a responsibility, a duty of care to themselves to understand how to use words at times and the power of those words.
What are some of the, over the years, since you have such an extensive background in this arena, over the years, what have you seen to be the biggest change or evolution when it comes to responsible beverage service?
Millennials and Generation Y, basically I see an aggressive drinking trend like there was in the Vietnam War, and the kids are drinking, I think, a little bit more aggressively, but they're planning their way home and taking cabs, and they're a little bit more projected that way. But the lack of conversations, the fact that they're more interested as the general population is, with phones and just talking and being obsessed with the use of their phones, has created a problem of a lack of communication. It also has affected the dining aspect of it. People are so busy on their phones, they don't eat, they don't really talk to each other, and that lack of conversation creates more of a problem when you have to make an intervention, because they're really not used to talking to people.
Yeah. And that's a really interesting point you bring up, and it kind of brings us to the main topic of our discussion today is the security aspect. What Nightlife Security does on our side, and then as well as the responsible beverage side, which you've been doing for years and are an expert at, is how do these two arenas meld, and why it's important to have a successful security operation. You first need to start with a successful responsible service program, and that's the basis of our conversation today. And I just want to comment also on the idea of cell phones and how cell phones have changed the dynamics of our business. And that's something that we see quite a bit on the security side.
Yeah.
Is that ability, there seems to be a lack of ability to communicate, to understand social cues in public now.
Yeah.
Where a youngster or somebody in their 20s, whenever they want to lash out, they can just send out a text or a tweet or a Facebook post. But when it comes to real life, and then you add alcohol into the equation, then that becomes a security risk. And how do we deal with that? So it's something that we see on our side quite a bit, just on the interaction side of things.
Well, Manny, I don't know of anybody that's better than you and Bob. You guys are the best that I've ever seen, so I really enjoy the opportunity to have this discussion with you.
Yeah, I as I am as well, and happy to have you on the podcast. With your training programs, you guys train nationwide. I know on your online program, I believe you're in 16 states, and more are coming online as the company evolves. How do you see your program, and how does it differentiate from other programs out there? Like, how do you feel that, or what sets you guys apart?
Well, I think we discuss situations, and we give them the opportunities to address issues and to be aware of the issues. It's like the state of Minnesota has an engagement for a duty of care, and it basically states, engage the prospective purchaser in conversation to note specific details of the purchaser's physical appearance, to observe the purchaser's conduct during his drinking at the supplier's establishment, and or to scrutinize the actions of the prospective customer in other ways by which the supplier may detect possible or intoxication, which is observable even though not obvious. And I think that just understanding that aspect, that you're obligated by law to have a duty of care to check people. And I think that changes things when they understand the importance of what their job really is, because they're really distributing a legal drug to the general public. And I think that they have to understand that duty of care, if you take care of people, they'll come back. And if you don't take care of them, they won't come back. So giving them what they need sometimes isn't what they want. And younger servers are put in a position where they need to have that understanding of how to care for people. And I think that's where our course excels, is the fact that we explain the importance of their decisions and how much trust the owners put in their decisions. So we want to give them the tools to help them become better decision makers in dealing with situations they may not have had experienced. And I guess what I'm trying to say is I'd rather give them the information they need to prevent the tragedy than have to learn from the tragedy.
Yeah, and I think your emphasis on, that duty of care and just looking out for people, it's important, especially with, I think, you've bartended, I've bartended it in my early years. And I think that you develop skills as you progress in your career as a bartender or server that give you the ability to confront those situations with a little bit more ease and professionalism. And you kind of see younger servers, bartenders, they don't quite have the social skills or the practice to implement that. And it's good that the motivation comes from just, being a good person and caring for your patrons to look out for them, right?
Oh, absolutely. We have two premises within our course that are really good. One is a SCAB, and that's speech, coordination, appearance, and behavior. So they are ongoing and continual checking of the customers during their time of service helps to eliminate or to address the issue of need to intervene. And second is a HAP. Any intervention that's ever made is to help, assist, and protect. The intent is always to give the customer the opportunity to prevent his own problems and have his own solutions. If you suggest it, a lot of times they'll just go with it and say, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do that. But if you never give them that opportunity, it creates a greater opportunity for risk.
Exactly. What do you think? I think I know the answer before asking this, but for our listeners, how important is the responsible beverage aspect when it comes to safety and security of a venue?
Well, it's safety and security of a community. If you're not fulfilling your legal obligations to keep the community safe, you won't be in business. A lot of nightclubs sometimes fall into a trap of 4 or 5 claims within 2 years, and they have to close down because they can't afford the insurance rates. So the longevity of your business is going to be dependent on your employees and how they protect you and the community. So it's a community effort, really, in a lot of situations. And as we're going to talk down the road, the aspect of noise in communities right now is putting a lot of businesses, nightclubs, out of business in big cities. They're moving to the suburbs because the contractors are putting them out of business. And noise is an issue that's protected in the community, for the community, by the police. So it's surprising some of the things that are happening that are destroying the opportunity to have a nightclub.
Yeah, and for us, when we do our training, part of our program, we want to communicate that 90% of all your issues that occur within a bar, restaurant, nightclub, or venue, those instances or those issues always involve alcohol or overconsumption. And so from our perspective, the ability to responsibly serve your guests and your patrons reduces the number of potential issues greatly, because you have control over the patrons and their activities. And so for us, it's huge as far as from a security operation to make sure you got a good hold on the responsible beverage service. I wanted to get your take also on, we call it a conflict. There's a conflict that happens internally in venues. And that conflict is a server or bartender's motivation to sell more, thus increasing their tip percentages. But that motivation to sell more oftentimes is in contradiction to a security program. What's your take on that? How do you communicate that to your trainees, that issue?
10% of the populace consumes about 70% of the alcohol. Your late night customers that come in are probably going to be more risky and more aggressive drinkers, and they're going to be able to hide their level of impairment better than most people because they're used to drinking. And I think the responsibility is to get them to change their thinking about transportation. And basically, that's one of the biggest things that millennials and Generation Y people have done is they've tried to eliminate the aspect of driving if they're going to be drinking. And that's one. The second thing is I think it's training bartenders to realize that if you're overpouring a customer, you usually get tipped by drink. If you're pouring doubles or stronger drinks, you're not making any money for yourself, and you're not making any money for the establishment. So controlling the drink pouring of the bartenders and wait staff, sometimes if they're younger especially, is a way to reduce the opportunity of risk. And that's what we do. We train people to look for opportunities before problems occur. And that's one of the best things that I think is the importance of their decision to bring questionable situations to managers and make sure that there's more than one person that's involved in doing the interventions. But the point is to control opportunities of risk and teach people how to be safer, the patrons as well. The communication with the patrons, Manny, is the key to reducing risk opportunity, because if there's a problem out there, you got more patrons than you do customers. So your staff's ability to communicate to the customer is the key to reducing the opportunities of danger in the community and in your establishment. But to answer your question, that comes from experience. So older employees have to really take the younger ones under their wings and try and explain to them why you do things in a certain way at a certain time to get the right person at the right place at the right time to prevent the opportunity of the unwanted event.
You know, your comment there raises a really good point in terms of the communication. And you know, whenever we go into a client site and we see a lot of issues, normally one of the first things we look at is what's their service look like. And, you know, chances are if you have an unruly house, you're going to have someone or a client that overserves or has issues around that area. In terms of communication, what are some important points that you guys communicate when it comes time to communicate within the staff? And what does that look like? Well,
you've got to train the managers to check with table service too. And managers, if they're spending most of their time in the office, it's not going to be productive to have them as somebody to help them when in the intervention or to make a decision on how to handle the person that's in question. I guess it comes down to, you know, like weekly management and pre-meetings and going through situational responses as to how the servers and the house policies that are set to deal with the problems that occur. You want to give them a solution before there's a problem. And I think that comes from training. It comes from sharing. It comes from the aspect of having good people that care about other people. But we're babysitters and nurses at times. We take care of people. We have a legal duty to take care of people. But the thing that stops the problems is the opportunities that create the problems. So by addressing a behavior that's not good by the employee is also addressing a problem that it might cause with the customer in the community. So we have to be observant and continual and ongoing in their observations to prevent the opportunity of risk. And it depends on how owners and managers stress in their training that the opinion of their employees keep them out of trouble. And sometimes people have their own opinions about things too. So it's a focus of the community standards of care and the business standard of care. And your house policies are stricter than state laws and city ordinances. And places that have house policies that protect the customers and protect the vendor and the servers are going to be a lot more successful, especially when they explain them to the patrons.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I want to get a little bit more into policies, but I also wanted to comment on your comment as far as communication. One of the things that we really try to emphasize in our training programs here at Nightlife Security is when it comes to responsible beverage service, the importance of having a drill down or having some sort of system in place where we communicate. So hopefully we're being proactive and we're not over-serving, but this is, part of the game that there's going to be instances where we have to intervene and we have to cut off service. We always try to point out that management needs to be monitoring the situation at all times and kind of have his head on a swivel to see potential issues. If a potential issue comes up, we need to communicate that. And what does that look like? Having a system in place to where we're communicating with the server, the bartender, the security team, the management, and anyone who else may need to. And then when the time comes is to communicate with the guest. And what does that look like? And is there a system in place? If we have a younger server bartender who might not be able to handle that situation, how can we support that effort? Is that a security member coming in and intervening? Is it a manager? And then also communicating to not only the guests, but people within his or her party. We spend a lot of time talking about identifying the alpha in a group. Like normally, if you look at a group dynamic, there's somebody in charge. And so, we always try to push communication to find that person who's in charge in the group to help us with our efforts to either mitigate consumption or to help us cut off the guest or have them leave. Your policies comment is a really good point. I heard you say that your policies, your house policies, can supersede either state or city ordinances or laws. And I think a lot of people don't understand that point, that you can always be stricter. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
On house policies?
Yeah, just house policies, like the ability for us to be stricter than what the law says.
Okay, house policies. I guess what I want to talk about more is that, as you were talking, some of the ones that I think are the most important are like two people got to be involved in interventions. And, sometimes it can get a lot more risky if it's a group of people. That what's the risk involved if there's 5 people and 2 of you? So, you want to try and bring friends into the situation because they have greater power at that time because they have an association usually with the person you're trying to intervene with. And if you can get them to help them to do the right thing, it makes better sense. And I basically think that a house policy that mandates that the friends have to take care of their friends is a real good policy. We want to make sure that people get home safely, and I think that the friendship that they have is something that you have to build into the equation for the intervention, hopefully, to get their friends to do the right thing. Paying for a cab's another thing. Customers' needs are measured and controlled. That the bartenders, if they are looking, you have to look for small things, because when people sit down, like in an adult entertainment bar, they're not moving. You don't see anything. They're just watching, and at the end of the night, you aren't going to know the level of impairment because you've seen the lack of movement. So each establishment will have different things that that occur that create opportunities. Gambling on pool tables is another thing. You have to have signs posted, no gambling, and be aware of what's going on, because that creates a problem. Your staff has to know the amount of alcohol that are in the drinks. How many drinks do you allow patrons to have in front of them? Your house policy, and the most important, is that drinking's a privilege of the establishment, not a right of the customer. He doesn't get to tell you what to do. Your house policy in dealing with employing security is, as I said before, a HAP, to help, assist, and protect. You've never kicked anybody out of a bar. You've helped or assisted them. There was no intent to do harm. And your house policy works as a security team, that all problems are handled by we, not I. That we work as a team, we work together, we do things together, and we know what our policies are. So I guess, Manny, aggressive patrons aren't allowed in. 90% of your problems, or a large percentage of your problems, are stopped at the front door. The initial and ongoing interactions with people help to reduce the frequency of problems. If you deal with that before it gets in, you got a lot more. I always say, how you doing, Manny? How are things going? Hey, great. Good to see you tonight. We do a scab at that point: speech, coordination, appearance, and behavior. Every intervention done with any customers during their time in the bar, in any association, all employees are security that are scabbing at that point to reduce the frequency or problems. And if they can get to a problem before it becomes a problem, you save yourself, the customer, the business. You save the customer any embarrassment. You save the business any problems by getting people to solve their own problems. And, hey, Manny, can you do me a favor? Hey, Manny, can you help me out tonight? The first thing a police officer is ever going to do if there's an assault or a problem that occurred, he's going to ask you, what did you say when you asked the guy to leave? Giving people the opportunity to solve their own problems is a major aspect of teaching in teaching service of alcohol and dealing with security, is giving people opportunities to save themselves from themselves. I can go on with more house policies, Manny, but I'm going to stop it right now with that.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I just want to put an emphasis on is that we see a lot of problems occur when you don't have these policies written down. And just, for the listener to consider just how important that is, because if it's not written, it's not a policy in my mind. A lot of venues operate their policies, procedures just by verbal. And it depends on who's working that night, what the policy is, and it changes from day to day or shift to shift. And so if you don't have written policies when it comes to your responsible beverage service, you need to have that in place, because that's really important. And then if something does happen, those written policies, procedures, and if you train on those and if you follow those policies, procedures, that'll really help you down the line if an event does occur in terms of liability and your ability to mitigate that risk. Robert, I wanted to talk a little bit more about how to find your program. I'm going to leave some notes in our podcast show notes so that the listeners can find you guys. And I really want to encourage owners, operators, managers to really think about their responsible beverage program. And if you don't have a good partner in that area, you need to get that in place, because it really does, from a security perspective, having a sound responsible beverage service program in place is so important for the success of your business. And not only that, but just the running of the business. Things are a lot easier when you don't have to deal with these sorts of issues. And if everybody on your team is on the same page through training, policies, procedures, communication, it makes your life as an owner, operator, manager just so much easier. Did you have anything to add on that?
Well, I think that the understanding of things that you look for impaired behavior is polyimpaired, that fatigue, emotion, psychological, physiological, legal drugs, illegal drugs, mental illness are all things that affect people. And alcohol is an added element that reduces their ability sometimes to deal and to become confused. And I think confusion is one of the biggest things that happens with people that are consuming alcohol sometimes, especially if it's with poly drug use. And the fact that we have so much drug use with older people that are proactive, but mixing with alcohol create other problems, creates another issue. But we have to be aware of that. We have to be aware that things change, and the change in the behavior is something that is gradual. It's like the boiled frog syndrome, that people, if they get used to something, they continue to do it. But over a period of time, it changes. That person changes, and there's a hidden danger that isn't obvious because of the ability for him to handle the alcohol at that point. And if it's with other drugs, that's another aspect. The aspect of marijuana is going to be a big issue in poly impairments if they're going to have two forms of recovery now. One from the marijuana, as it gets legalized, they're going to have to get insurance on that. So there's a lot of things that are changing, but the thing that I think the most is being aware and looking for things that aren't normal, or things that are little things that happen when you start to become impaired, and to look for the little things to prevent the big things.
Absolutely. Those are all great points. Well, Robert, I want to thank you for spending some time with us today. This was a really good discussion, and I appreciate you taking the time to visit with us. Robert Pomplun, Chief Learning Officer and founder of Serving Alcohol Incorporated. Thank you for joining us on today's podcast. We'll be putting some links on how to find you, and I would really, really like to encourage our listeners to reevaluate their responsible beverage program and to think about what you can do to improve and how to make things better. It really does add to the quality of life in a workplace if you have a good program in place, as well as the quality of the experience for your guests. And I think, all of us in hospitality are doing this because we love serving people. We love and care about their experience. And definitely a responsible beverage program is an important part of that piece. Robert, anything else before we sign off today?
Just that you and Robert are the greatest, and if anybody has the opportunity to use your services, they're doing a favor to the community and to themselves. And thank you so much for the opportunity to talk with you, Manny.
Anytime, Robert. We'll have to do this again, and we'll talk to you soon. On that note, listeners, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Okay, sounds good, Manny. Have a good day.
Have a good one.
Hey, listeners, before we go, I just wanted to thank you for spending the time today with us, listening in on the conversation. If you want to learn more about what we do and how we can help your venue achieve your security goals as far as operations goes, visit us at nightclubsecurity.com. You're going to find a whole bunch of free resources, anything to do with hospitality security, as well as our online training programs we have to offer. If there's any sort of questions, comments, or things you'd like to ask us, feel free to send me an email. My email address is Manny, MANNY, @nightclubsecurity.com. We would love to hear from you. And until next time, this is Manny Marquez thanking you for listening. And until then, be safe.